Apex Online Racing is sponsored by Elgato, who created this lovely stream deck. For more information about the stream deck, the link is in the description below.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a moment we've all been waiting for, the start of Season 20 here for Apex Online Racing. Season 20 on F1 2020 here in 2020. A lot of 20s, including a 20-man grid of some of the best drivers the PC side has to offer. We start the season at familiar grounds, Albert Park here in Australia. For the first round of the season, it's been a tradition to start the season here since 1996. Only twice has Albert Park not played host to the World Championship opener, and of course, one of those occurrences was this year. However, we will be running the full calendar, so the 22 races planned at the start of the year, including 2 brand new circuits for the drivers. Hanoi in Vietnam is a tight street circuit that takes inspiration from some of F1's greatest corners to create an interesting high-speed circuit, and we return to Zandvoort in the Netherlands for the first time since 1985 for the Dutch Grand Prix. Both races appearing within the first 5 rounds, so we don't have long to wait. Let's turn our attention to the event at hand, and Australia can provide some great action that we severely lack in real life. Turn 1 and Turn 13 ought to be the primary overtaking spots during the race. As you can see, moves being done in the past on your screens. We of course have the usual soft, medium and hard tyres on offer, with a one-stop strategy predicted for the race. Welcome back everyone, it's been a wee bit of a while since we were last on air, nearly 3 months ago I do believe, back in June. But it's great to be back commentating over these drivers tonight. My name is James Costello and I'll be one of your commentators to take you along with the ride this season, and joining me for the second season in a row is a partner in crime, Jens. Welcome back to commentating, Jens. It's been a while, but it is great to be back, and the start of the season always brings good vibes, and I'm all for an exciting opening round to start the season.
Yes, certainly. Welcome back, and it's good to be back here at Albert Park. And with the start of the season, we have a bit of a fun one. It's rain for the first qualifying session of the year, which is going to be quite interesting to see, because normally you wait for the drivers to come out there and you want to see them in the dry, put it flat out, but starting out with a bit of a different challenge to the normal.
Yeah, definitely. 16 drivers on show today for the opening round of the season. And of course, we don't often see wet weather here at Albert Park. I think the last time I might have seen it was potentially in 2014 at the start of this turbo hybrid era. And we'll see how the drivers can fare in this first qualifying session of the season. Obviously, most of these drivers have been moved up and they've never been in the top split of AOR so far. Looking to set a good first impression on all of us in the top split of AOR. Obviously, being the best caliber of drivers we can find. Hopefully, they'll be nicely matched and we can have some good battles throughout the season.
Yeah, certainly, and one of the guys that we know can provide some awesome battling is Philip Presnader, currently down in 11th place without a time. No one has set a time just yet, but he was one of the contenders in F1 last season. He's currently out on the intermediate tyres, about to set one of the first lap times in this session. Kevin, one of the new ones in this season, sets the first one, but then Preshner comes across the line, the 1:35.1 here, just at the beginning of qualifying. Quite treacherous conditions out there, but most of the drivers choosing to go out there on a set of intermediate tyres, but a few out there trusting the good old full wets.
We often like to gaze over the clouds and look at, what the weather's sprucing up. And of course, obviously, being full wet conditions, obviously we don't expect that. I mean, we always ask for it, but for some reason the gods have decided to bring it to fruition for the opening round, at least for the opening qualifying of this season. It don't look like it's going to get any better for the conditions wise. I think we'll be having a full wet qualifying, and it potentially might even get severe to potentially need the wet tyres. So the fact that every single driver is now out on the track gives me a slight impression that these might be the best conditions, and some of them already going onto the wet compound tyres, like Calvin in the Racing Points and Alessio in the other Ferrari, set a better time than his teammates on the wet compound tyres. So it looks like the two compounds of tyres are evenly matched at the moment, but we'll see which tyre will fare the durability of this qualifying session, and which will be closer to which will be faster come the end.
Yes, certainly, and an interesting thing during these wet conditions is that the drivers often choose to go 2, sometimes even 3 laps on their tyres, and as you can see, even improving on them, as Preshner put a faster lap in and then got overshot by both Kimmich and Kevin, all of them doing now 2 laps on their intermediate tyres, and it's very much because these tyres almost get better the longer you go on them. So you fuel up for 2, 3, maybe even sometimes 4 attempts, and then you just go out there and bang in lap time after lap time on these tyres, going better and better sometimes, as you can see on some of the drivers that has improved their lap times.
Speaking of improving lap times, I'm on board with Warren in one of the Hasses, and he now moves up into P8. So pretty much halfway through this qualifying session, and still have quite a few drivers yet to set any times. Some still in the pits. That's Felix in the Red Bull, and his teammate Michael Tinetza also on the wet tyres out there. So at the moment we have Jan Fehler. Obviously we've known for quite some time, well, definitely the longest serving driver here in the top split of AOR. Coordinator, of course, and definitely sees himself as maybe having a good outing this season. Hasn't really had the best of seasons in the past. Has always been around about a midfield sort of driver. Very reliable is Jan Fehler to pick up on any scraps that drivers potentially ahead of him might get into. But maybe this will be a different season, different fortunes for Jan Fehler. Maybe he can see himself potentially as a championship challenger, and he's got a good teammate alongside him. Camille obviously joined last season, or joined into Split 1 last season. The Polish driver set some really good times, got a few podiums here and there. I hope we'll be looking to continue that form in the other McLaren.
Yeah, it would be great to see Camille continue it, and of course also see Fehler jump up from being a midfield man to maybe being able to challenge for the championship this season. As you said, he's one of the ones that has been in F1 the longest of all these people we're seeing here today. But a few drivers now putting in their lap times. We're only missing 3 people down at the bottom, and that is Calvin Paris and Felix Lundberg. And if you look around at the timing boards, you're seeing that most of the faster times are set on the intermediate tyres, looking like the conditions have improved a bit, and it at least looks like the rain isn't coming down as heavy as it did earlier. But so most of the drivers opting to go on to the intermediates instead of staying on those full wets, although Licio and Michael still out on the full wets.
Yep, the times are tumbling. Now Paris goes nearly 1.5 seconds clear at the front in the second half on a 1:32.5. Predicting the pole time, if this carries on, could potentially dip into the 120s. But of course, that does rely heavily on the weather getting better. Yeah, we still have two drivers without a time. Obviously, Calvin in one of the racing points, and then Felix. But this is actually Brownie, Jens. He's actually just changed his name. I don't mind if we want to call him Felix or Brownie. I personally prefer Brownies.
Yeah, that's at least going to be something you have to get used to then. Right then.
But regardless, here comes Brownie. He's actually purple through the second sector, according to my screens at least.
Yeah, same on
I'll
mine.
see what he can do. Obviously, was a T1 driver last season as well, but made up some of at the back of the field for most of the season. And once again, he could be in a similar situation with Failer, whereas he could potentially set higher expectations of him for this upcoming season. As he rounds the final corner now in the Red Bull, and will make his way tentatively onto the throttle and out of the final corner, and up towards the line, and it sets a 1:33.8. That puts him on the third row provisionally. With just over 7 minutes to go of this qualifying session, and that leaves everyone bar Calvin without a time. Speaking of the devil, he is now coming through the final two corners in the racing points. It's a little bit screwy coming onto throttle there, but now he makes his way out of the final corner, and everyone must have a set lap time with 7 minutes to go, and now he goes into 8th place, ahead of his teammate Kevin in the other racing point.
Yep, certainly all the drivers now have set their times, and with the times tumbling down a bit, we have quite a gap from the fastest time, a 1:32.555, down to the slowest of a 1:35.0, and it is really at, well, as I say that, Camille comes in with a 1:31.8, so the time's certainly tumbling, and you can see the fastest times are set on the intermediate tyres. So it is clear to see that the conditions out on track are improving, but it's not looking likely that it will be anywhere near dry tyres come the end. So the drivers will be starting on a fresh set of dry tyres come the race. That'll be for everyone, not just the ones outside the top 10 as it usually is, because of course the wet tyres are used currently in this qualifying session.
And that, of course, makes qualifying ever more crucial, as the reverse strategy can work here in Australia, but obviously that does imply the drivers inside the top 10 starting on used soft tyres, you'd imagine, whereas the drivers at the top 10 have free choice of tyre wear. Obviously, now that everyone will be able to start on fresh set of tyres, that nullifies that completely. So yeah, the qualifying is ever more crucial, as that is Calvin. Jumping up into second place, improving just over 2 seconds on his past personal best, but couldn't overthrow Camille, who currently has provisional pole and is going again actually. I wonder if he can improve on his second attempt. This is a back-to-back qualifying attempt on these intermediate tyres to Camille, and he goes even faster by 1.1 seconds, as Kimmy's now go behind him. Goes onto the second row, so the track is definitely getting better. So the drivers need to be out at the end of the session where track evolution is at its highest, and obviously the drivers are clearing up water on the racing line every time they pass. Every time they pass at any section of the track. So yeah, the end of the qualifying session, squeaky bum time, we're going to call it. It's going to be an absolute melee to see who potentially will take pole position for the first race of the season, and it could be anyone really. There are people that we would expect to be up there, as President now goes seconds, but it really could be anyone if the time is right.
Yes, certainly you must say, because as a driver just goes over the racing line, the track just gets better and better. Now with just 4 minutes to go of this session, most of the drivers are out on track, and you'd probably see them come out around this time, fueled up for maybe 3 runs on their tyres. Some may be choosing to come out later and maybe only do 1 or 2, but most of the drivers, as you can see, are out there 4, possibly 3 attempts on their tyres. And Paris now, as we're on board with, he has gone purple in the first and the second sector. Now coming into the third sector, now into the final couple of corners through the right hander of turn 14. Very tricky to get right, both in the wet and in the dry. Then into 15, the left hander, and then just slowly coming onto the throttle, going through that right hander of 16 that's normally taken about flat out in the dry. Now coming up to the line, what will he be able to do? It's only third for now, but it is very, very close at the top. Only 5 thousandths up to second place, and just a few tenths up to Camille in first place, as Kevin there goes into second place. Now the next couple of drivers to cross the line, I believe that is going to be Preshnet. I know he comes into the pits, he's got his lap time invalidated, so he'll come out for another 1 or 2 attempts. As now Alicio comes through the final corner into 5th gears. He's coming through the right hander there, comes on full throttle, now down to cross the line. What will he be able to do as he comes across the line? It's enough for provisional pole position with 2 minutes and 40 seconds to go, 1:30.5. The next driver to cross the line, I believe that is going to be Andy. He's about to start his flying lap, a new flying lap for him on a fresh set of tyres. Then it will be the next driver to cross the line with a positive lap time. It's going to be Michael Tanitsa. He's currently in P11 on a set of 1 lap old intermediate tyres. He's coming through the final corner now onto full throttle, coming down the straight. I don't think it's going to be an improvement. No, it is not. So he's going out for another lap there. He was 2.6 seconds down on his lap time. The next driver to cross the line, that will be Jan Fehler. Coming across the line there, it is enough for 1:31.2. Then it is Tom, no, I believe that was Florin up into 8th place. Then it's Tom, the next driver to cross the line. He's onto the straight now with 1 minute and 40 to go. About to cross the line, what will he be able to do? It's only enough for 8th place for now. Next driver to cross the line, I believe that's Alicia again, but he has gotten his lap time invalidated. But he will have enough time to get up to the line and start a new lap if he so desires. But it looks like he's pulling into the pits and has had enough for qualifying for now. Now let's just jump on board with Andinator as he's coming up to finish his lap, coming through the final right-hander there onto full throttle, taking it in 5th gear onto the straight. What will he be able to do coming across the line? It's enough for 7th place for now. Then it is going to be the racing point of Calvin about to start his lap, coming out on a new set of intermediate tyres. Anyone about to finish their laps now? I think we're going to be seeing Michael. Yeah, no, he's starting his lap, I believe. Michael Tanitsa up to cross the line now. What will he be able to do? It's going to be a small improvement, but it's only up to 13th place. Then the next driver is Kimi as he crossed the line. No large improvement for him as far as I could see. Then it's the Haas of someone. That was Paris, I believe. He crossed the line there, but not any large improvement. Then it is the I believe that was the something else crossed the line. But then it'll be Tom 97 to come across the line. He does not improve, but he has enough time to start a new flying lap. But there it is, the red lights coming on and the flag has fallen. So Ulasosi won't be able to start a new flying lap, unfortunately, as he's coming up to the checkered flag. Then it'll be Andinator. He has gotten his lap time invalidated. It'll be Calvin. Calvin's still going strong, not an invalidated lap time. Coming into the final couple of corners, lock up there before coming into the left hander of 15, then the right hander of 16. What will he be able to do as he's going full throttle into 5th, then 6th, then 7th, coming up to the line, goes up into 6th place there. Then it's going to be Camille coming now through the left hander, 15, right hander of 16, taking it 5th gear, going full throttle now, then into 6th, then into 7th, coming up to the line. Then it's a new provisional pole position, 1:30.5. The drivers behind, will they be able to challenge that? and it was one of the harsh drivers. I think that was Warren coming across the line there. Then Parrish, what will he be able to do? Will he be able to challenge the 130.5? Coming up to the line now. Yes, he is. 130.4, new fastest lap. That's new pole position for Paris there. Then Presneda coming across the line, not enough. Only 130.544. Then it was the Red Bull of Brownie coming across the line for 12th, and I believe that was the final Alpha coming across the line with Tom 97 taking 9th place. But Paris taking pole position with a 130.4.
I never knew the capital of France was this good in a race car, gents. Just joking. That was a very interesting end to the qualifying session. The provisional pole changed 3 times in the course, and I thought Presley had nicked it at the end, but wasn't to be. But the gap is only 68,000 between the top 4, and Alessio jumping from provisional pole when the checker flag fell down to P4. Jan Freyler only a 10th and a half back, then Kevin and Calvin in the 2 racing points. Going to be difficult to set them apart. Kimmy's in P8 and Tom 97 P9 and Donata in P10 rounding out the top 10. And then of course we have FK Gaming and Brownie just behind him. And the rest I couldn't quite catch in time, but it should be a very interesting race. And it is full wet conditions for the Grand Prix. Are we sure that the Rangers lobby, the lobby creator hasn't changed the weather to full wet or instead of dynamic? Because we've never seen this. No, the weather is completely dynamic, but just they've decided that we're gonna get not just a wet qualifying, but a wet Grand Prix, or a wet start to the Grand Prix. But judging by how heavy it's falling, it looks like it could be a full race full of these conditions.
You know, I've only seen rain whilst commentating once in Australia, and that was back in season 16, but that was also in qualifying, but I've never seen it in the race. And that is going to certainly be interesting to see as the drivers are readying up before coming out and doing the formation. And then we'll see. It looks like all the drivers are out on the full wet tyres. No surprise there. The rain is falling quite hard, as you can see on your screens. But the drivers coming off the line, it's quite treacherous out there, but just easing the throttle as they're practicing how to find their grip for the start, as I'm sure not many of these drivers would have practiced this in the full wets.
I wouldn't have. That's for sure. I mean, I think the last time I remember a wet race, and I say wet in quotation marks, was maybe 2010. It was a bit damp, but it wasn't wet to this extent. I've certainly never seen our park in such pouring rain. That's for the Grand Prix, so that's going to spice things up. I do remember though in AOR there was, I think in season 17 or season 18, one of the 2 races, there was an F2. That was a wet race, and that was one that Tom 97 won. He was in F2 that season, and he prevailed in as one of his only victories in that season. Can he do something magical today? I mean, who could win this Grand Prix? The predicted pit stop strategy enters wets, and it looks like it's going to be a full wet race according to the pit stop strategy. We'll see if that comes into fruition. We might be needing the intermediate tyres, but we'll have to wait and find out. The driver's definitely unprepared, you'd imagine, but they have to face the 29 lap mark in a way they've never done before.
Certainly, as I think my game had a small issue there with the skybox. For a second it showed that there were no clouds in the slightest above, but it is pouring down. It's pouring down. Yeah, just a few. But yeah, the drivers now lining up on the grid. They're going to try and find the absolute best traction point in these treacherous conditions. Something I'm sure they have never tried before. As you can see the red flashing lights of the cars as they're lining up on the grid.
Let's get going then for Season 20 here in F1 2020 in 2020, and we are getting ready for the 5 red lights, and when they go out, Season 20 will be underway. Paris, let's see the start from the top 2. It looks like the house has got a brilliant start compared to the McLaren drivers and the Ferrari behind. That's Camille and Presader going wheel to wheel, and that's the Racing Point getting involved with the other McLarens and the Renault. As they all now stream down towards turn 3, that's Alessio and Jan Fehler getting argy-bargy down towards turn 3. Bit of wheel banging as there's 3 wide in the background between Racing Point, a Mercedes and an Alfa Romeo, but I think they've all managed to file through the first 3 or 4 corners pretty much unscathed. Everyone a bit tentative to get going, really. And Alessio has had some technical difficulties, and that has caused a bit of a kerfuffle in the mid-pack. We've got about 3 or 4 drivers around, separated by pretty much a blanket. But to get going down into the second sector, on the front it's pretty much clean sailing. At the back, it's a bit of a mayhem, to be honest. Jan Fehler gets past Calvin once again, as Calvin now actually tries to get past Jan Fehler down towards turn 11. We don't often see moves here, especially in the wet, and the Racing Point, thankfully, decides to back out before that could have been a very nasty crash. But we can look at the position changes. A few big gainers. Alessio, obviously, the big loser at the back, and I think his race is pretty much over, considering how he's left the session and isn't joining back in a hurry.
No, yeah, very unfortunate for him, as I think there might have been some heating issues or something in that regard with him leaving the session, but it looks like it is all sorted now. As you can see at the top, they are just slowly sailing away, quite literally, and further behind the gaps are not looking that close, although for P6 that is Calvin able to keep close to Fehler as they're just sailing through Albert Park. But now coming through Sector 1, as you can see, the drivers just taking it slow, no one really going for any audacious moves, as you can quite clearly understand in these conditions. As if you just stay on board here with Calvin, you can see you can't even properly see Fehler's car ahead. You can just see that red light blinking and just spot that papaya orange.
Conditions are treacherous, and obviously most of the drivers are just taking a bit easy for the first opening lap, just settling into a groove, getting accustomed, even though they were accustomed during the qualifying session. But the race is a different entity completely. Pit Stop Strategy is still claiming that it will be a full wet race, maybe even 2-stop. For some of the drivers, if they use their wets a bit too hard, but these drivers are capable enough to get these wets to just a 1-stop strategy. If that, potentially even all the way to the end of the Grand Prix. Because you can do that, you can actually, well, if it's a wet condition, you don't actually have to pit. But obviously, that'll probably leave you at a big disadvantage come the end of the Grand Prix. Meanwhile, further back, we have Andrea and FK Gaming getting into a squabble in the battle for 9th place in today's Grand Prix. FK Gaming, his teammate Tom97 is just up ahead. In the second half for Romeo, as Andrea pulls out, probably to go a bit defensive on FK Gaming, but yeah, it's very difficult to overtake here, even in the dry, let alone in the wet. And no DRS is definitely going to hamper any sort of easy breezy moves. So it's all going to be down on the brakes, any moves, and the drivers who pull off the moves will obviously get a great reward from it, but no moves done as of yet from that one onwards, I should say. For some reason Andrea is flopping about a bit on my screen, it seems, so I think he's having a few connection issues as well. FK Gaming tries to get past him, and it looks like he's gone onto the gravel, gone onto the grass, and FK Gaming has got past the Mercedes driver, but probably not in the way he would have wanted to, but he's passed, and yeah, the ghosted Mercedes now down into 10th.
Yeah, not quite sure what is going on in this regard. We might be seeing some connection issues on their end, as Michael Tanitsa on lap 3 gets a 3-second time penalty for abusing the track limits, something that the drivers are being discouraged by those penalties that they get. Those 3-second time penalties can be quite detrimental for your race. We've seen it a couple of times. I remember a couple of incidents last season where positions have been lost and gained by those frisky time penalties come the end of the race.
And we've seen race wins being decided through penalties, especially here. I don't remember commentating season 19, but definitely season 18, we did have a race win decided through penalties. There's a yellow flag somewhere, and I think it's for Ulas in the Renault, and it is.
Yes,
he is facing 90 degrees to the right, and he must have had a spin through turn 1 and turn 2. It's gonna. He's got a puncture, is it? No, just the animation looked a little bit wacky from my end, but no, he gets going again, but not in the position he would have wanted to be. 8 seconds behind a ghosted Ferrari, who's no longer with us, and at the back of the pack by quite some margin, and he's going to have to perform miracles to get back into today's race, you'd imagine, not barring any safety cars or whatnot. As there's more yellow flags, because Scrippy is now into the barriers, so second casualty in as many corners, and he is out of the Grand Prix. On the exit of turn 9 and turn 10 there. Ulas is lucky that his AI car didn't slam into the back of him. No safety car course or any sort of things like that from the Mercedes driver. And just some yellow flags in that particular sector of the lap. As it's lap 5, and it's still Paris leading from Camille, from Presnader, and then Kevin a bit further back. Then there's a bit of a gap between Kevin and Kimmy's, who's in P5. Then Jan Thaler, P6. Then Calvin P7 ahead of Tom 97. Then FK Gaming in P9 and Andrea. Looks like he's sorted his issues out, and it is the last of the points runners at the moment.
Yep, drivers currently just trundling around slowly, looking after their tyres, whilst also looking out for not going off the track too much. No one really able to go for any moves currently, and that is quite the sign of rain. Most drivers just sticking behind, so you're not really able to use any DRS, and you don't really want to press that ERS button or use any rich mix, since that can spin up your rear tyres quite a bit. But just going on board here with Camille and looking at the skies above, I'm not seeing as much rain as when we started, and the racing line is looking more and more dry, so we might be able to see some of the drivers, if not all the drivers, jump onto a set of intermediate tyres sooner rather than later. Maybe the next lap or some laps after that, because these full wet tyres are maybe not the optimal tyre anymore. As speaking of the devil, Camille comes into the pits now. Let's just see what tyre he will be going on to. I believe that is a green walled intermediate tyres. Yes, it is. Coming out of the pits there, green light for him, as further behind we're seeing Tom 97 pit in as well, and so does Warren. I suspect they're all going on to a set of intermediate tyres. Tom is, and what about Warren? I would be surprised if he wasn't. Yes, he is. I can see those green wall tyres being ready in the Haas garage there. Coming on without any issues, no loose wheel nuts or the like. So, 3 drivers, Camille, Tom and Warren, already onto the set of intermediate tyres that I was talking about. Because as you can see, that racing line isn't looking as wet as it did a couple of laps ago. And you can see that the rain is not falling as hard as it did at the start of the race and at the start of qualifying. So it'll be interesting to see what the drivers already on to the intermediate tyres can do versus the guys still on the full wets.
I'll keep an eye out on Camille's second time compared to the drivers he was battling, of course, he was a step behind Paris and Fresneda, and Kevin is now joined onto the squabble or whatnot for the lead of the Grand Prix. Let's see if any of them respond. Paris unsurprisingly responds, as does Fresneda, but Kevin surprisingly carries on for another lap, so he thinks that those intermediate tyres aren't as useful as they could be potentially next lap around. But let's see if Camille's out lap has been good enough to potentially overhaul him ahead of Paris, but unfortunately for him, he's got Brownie right ahead of him. Thankfully, he'll get out of the way and come into the pit lane. But out comes Paris. Can go full throttle now, and there's Camille in the background. He's ahead of Camille, and Fresneda is also ahead of Camille. But Camille now taking the racing line through turn 1 and 2. Might be able to snatch that position back from Fresneda, who's already going defensive, leaving absolutely no room to the inside. Camille's going to have to go all the way around the outside, and there's not enough room there. He gets barged off the track there by Fresneda, who's on cold intermediate tyres. Hard but fair racing, and unfortunately for Camille, I think he pitted. That gamble to pit and try and do the undercut has resulted in losing a place, and maybe even losing another place if Kevin can do an insane in-lap and somehow get ahead of the McLaren.
Yeah, certainly it's all about that clean air, and that was something Camille didn't get. He came out just behind Brownie and was stuck behind him for the rest of that lap, and then at the end when Brownie pitted in, it was too late for Camille to do anything, meaning that he came just behind Fresneda there. But let's see what Kevin, Fela and Calvin are able to do once they come in to the pits. Will Racing Point do the double stack? Yes, it looks like they will. Let's see if Calvin is going to be held up too much or if they make it right on the money, as Kevin comes into his pit box, and that is done there. Then where will Paris be compared? Paris will be passed. Same looks like it for Fresneda, and the same for Camille. So Kevin only able to gain time on them, but not gain any positions.
Yeah, and Phelan comes out just behind Kimmy's, and Tom has done the undercut on Calvin, probably due to the fact that he had to be held because of the double stack. I don't know why that's in the game, but hey ho, Calvin I'm sure can get back at Tom 97, who's actually right in the back of Fela, who, with those cold tyres, if Tom wants his best opportunity to get past the McLaren, it is right now, when the German tyres aren't up to temperature, up to working range. Andrea now gets a 3-second time penalty. He's behind this lot, him down in P9. So everyone has moved on to the intermediate tyres. Obviously, Alessio, obviously, he's still not with us. He's the outlier, but he's still running in P11, so that's impressive from a Ghost point of view. We've got Warren, Brownie, Ulas, and FK Gaming has fallen way behind. I don't know what's happened to him, because he was close to his teammate, but now he's plumb last out of the drivers who are still running, and he's about 25 seconds behind his teammates. So something's gone wrong for FK Gaming. I wonder if he accidentally pitted onto the wets instead of the intermediate tyres. Potentially. I mean, he just had a really bad lap on lap 6 with a 56-second sector 3, so potentially he did actually stop on the wets by accident, and that might be the reason why he's down in 15th and battling away with Ulas for pretty much nothing in today's Grand Prix, when he could have been battling for so much more, and he gets time penalty to add insult to injury. As now the ghost of Alessio comes into the pits for a set of intermediate tyres. Everyone is now on the green stripe tyres, and potentially we'll see the race end on the intermediate tyres. But still a long way to go. We're not even a third of the way through this race just yet. So the weather can still change for the better, or even potentially for the worse. We'll have to wait and see though. Paris is still out on the lead and is extending his gap to Fresneda in P2.
Yeah, Paris really showing his pace on these intermediate tyres, really able to build that gap down to Pressionator and down to Camille as well. None of those drivers are able to challenge up in front, and no drivers down the field are able to challenge currently, still sticking in those trains that they are, as Tom gets a 3-second time penalty, really showing that these conditions are hard to drive in, and that it's easy to just drift a bit wide or cut a corner a bit too much and get a time penalty, because the grip just isn't there to do what you normally do on a dry line. As he just there came out of turn 14, almost lost it a bit as he was trying to get the throttle down. But behind he has Calvin to challenge him. He's within 0.8 of a second, so he'll have to watch out for him if he wants to stay in P7. But currently just sitting in that train behind Kimi's in 5th.
So at the moment we've got a bit of a stalemate. The gaps aren't really getting close. I mean, we've got a lot of drivers packed in, as you said, about off a P5, you could say. Yeah, we've got Paris, Pressionator pretty much equidistant between himself and Paris, and Camille right behind him. Kevin's just under a second behind Camille. However, with no DRS and it's a wet track, that really doesn't make that much of a difference. But he's right there. Camille, we happen to look in his rearview mirrors to keep his podium position at the moment, ahead of the racing points. But yeah, there's a long gap between Kevin and Kimi's, who's holding P4 right now for the Renault team, and is doing a fine job at that. But he's got Jan Failer behind Tom 97, who I think will be happy with a P7 at the moment. Just trying to get close to Jan Failer ahead, but yeah, these drivers are very equal when it comes to pace, and it's going to take a mistake of some sort or penalties to really separate them. Speaking of, I'm going to double check the penalties, or the warnings I should say, for the drivers who are at the front of the field. Paris has 2 warnings, Pressionator has 2 warnings, Camille has 2 warnings, and Kevin has 2 warnings. So they're all living on a tightrope. And obviously, 1 penalty and Paris loses the Grand Prix. But obviously, there's still a long way to go in this Grand Prix. And yeah, I don't know about you, gents, but I think the track, it's still raining, that's for sure, but I don't think the track is getting much drier. And who knows, if it stops raining, could see this race out on dry compound of tyres.
Yeah, a dry compound of tyres would be preferred if the rain stops, and in my eyes I think it would spice the race up a bit, trying to see when you go on to those dry tyres. We've seen it before in countless Grand Prix where you go on to a dry tyre a bit too early and then you just crash out all of a sudden in the first corner, or you go on to the dry tyre too late and you lose tons of positions. So it is really going to be interesting to see if that comes, and I'm beginning to just see a small bit of blue sky above, but yeah, the rain is still coming down, not as heavy as in the beginning, but it is still coming down, and that racing line is still wet enough for the intermediate tyres, and it doesn't look like it's going to be dry anytime soon.
Pressionator has actually closed up the gap slightly, down to just sort of was under 2 seconds for a slight moment there. I wonder if he's starting to push a little bit more now, knowing that these intermediate tyres might not be needed for as long as they make out for, giving him the urge to potentially push a little bit more and use a bit more of those tyre wear, in the hope that we do switch onto the slick tyres coming towards the end of the Grand Prix, potentially even closer or even further away from the end of the Grand Prix. Who knows? Yeah, we're just waiting on pretty much any mistake, really, to be honest. But if we're waiting for mistakes, I think we're commentating on the wrong league, Jen, because this is obviously Tier 1, and this is a top caliber of drivers, and mistakes don't come few and far between, especially at the front, where Paris still continues to lead and has led every single lap, pretty much, barring the pit stops window, where he decided to pit. Now everyone decided to pit onto the intermediate tyres, but and not much action going on at the moment. Michael Stinnet's got another 3-second time penalty. I think that's his third of the afternoon, if I'm correct. Yeah. So he's obviously going to drop down the order because of his penalties. Although saying that, he's pretty much in no man's land. He's got 5 seconds ahead of him and 5 seconds behind him, so the drivers ahead and behind him. And then Felix, Brownie down in P12, and his teammates very far apart, which obviously you do get these sort of races with the wet tyres. Obviously, drivers making more mistakes in track conditions that they weren't accustomed to and have been preparing for. So, that is why we do see a bit of a widespread in terms of the grid. But if this driver weather does come towards the end of the race, and who knows, maybe even we get a safety car. The end of the race is going to be very interesting, but as for now, everyone's just setting their own pace, really, going along with their own race, and the only real battle, not of worth, really, is Camille and Kevin, who are under a second apart. Kevin has been right close to Camille for this entire stint. But yeah, just can't seem to get close enough on the straights. And obviously into the corners where there's not that many overtaking spots. Here's one of them into turn 1. It's not a corner where you want to do a deep dive. You need to be alongside in the braking zone. Else, any chance of getting past is pretty much gone. I think turn 3 or turn 9 since you're the only real overtaking opportunities that the drivers may decide to do in these sort of wet conditions. But yeah, not many opportunities are arising as of now on lap 14 of this Grand Prix. Nearly halfway through, and it's still Paris who leads the Grand Prix.
Yeah, you must say, and according to my game, we're just coming on here to lap 14, and it is apparently a open window for the intermediate tyres, which you can see all the drivers are on. And it is looking like the rain is still coming down, and it's not looking like it's going to be dry, but I would suggest maybe not going on to another set of intermediates, since a few lighter clouds are coming. But you of course never know if any of these drivers have decided to go on to another set of intermediate tyres to maybe go to the end. But these drivers currently just going round and round without making any mistakes and trying to just keep as close to each other as possible, and just waiting for the driver in front to maybe make a small mistake so you can get closer and maybe get in with a shot for an overtake. As yeah, again, from this lap up until lap 24, it is an open pit window for the intermediate tyres, apparently, according to my game. But Kevin sticking behind Camille in third, and further ahead we see Preshnader. He has closed the gap from about 2.5 seconds down to 1.5 seconds now here on lap 15, so he's pushing and pushing currently, and he might be hoping that the race turns into a dry race in not too long, since he's just going and smashing these tyres through the laps and trying to get as close to Paris as possible, and maybe getting within an overtaking opportunity come down one of the two main straights. But further down we're also seeing Kevin close to Camille, trying to see any overtaking opportunities there. Just staying close and hoping for the mistake from the driver ahead.
I don't know about you, Jens, but on my screen I received a pit window for soft tyres. Don't know if that's the game giving us false hope or what. But potentially the game knows something that we, or maybe the drivers, don't know. But yeah, I was on board with Tom97 throughout that lap, and he made a very big mistake got very tail happy on the exit of turn 2 there. But thankfully for him, the likes of Calvin and Andrea, who were the two drivers behind him, weren't able to close, but he's lost a bit of time between himself and Jan Thaler, who is starting to gain on. Kimmy's in front in the Renault. His teammates, who last doing too sweetly down in P14 in today's Grand Prix. The last of the drivers who are still technically with us. Let's go down in 15th and last, and that is Michael. That is Brownie and FK Gaming actually ahead of him, getting very close to comfort. The two German drivers, a lot of German drivers on this squad actually, scrapping away for P12. However, this is just minor scraps, not even for the points. But yeah, lap 16 of this race, and you know the rain is definitely still coming down. But the track is getting less wet, or there is the racing line is. You can start seeing it to be more apparent, more different to the other parts surfaces of the track. Because that's last getting another time penalty down in 14. So I wonder if the game is telling cities or not, or if the track will be dry enough. Come the end of the Grand Prix, because it's one thing being dry, it's one thing, you know, the drivers switching onto the slick tyres, because if it becomes dry like lap 27, 28, that's obviously too late in the Grand Prix. It's going to be the next few laps really will make the key difference if the weather gets any better, to change potentially the order of this race with pit stops and whatnot, and drivers going on to slicks, softs, mediums or hards. You can imagine if the drivers come in now with slick tyres, they'd probably go on the mediums or medium in the softs.
Oh,
if they do have a fresh set.
The further behind, just FK Gaming just bumped into the rear end of Brownie there, down in 12th and 13th. Doesn't look like he lost any front wing, but he had coming into turn 15 just quite a big lock up. Just clonking the rear end there. Both drivers seeming to be okay. No front wing lost, no punctures, nothing really there. Just a small collision further back for 12th place. But yeah, the drivers just looking like they are clearing off that racing line. But you have to remember, the racing line might be dry with the intermediate tyres because they are removing so much water. But the rain is still falling, so if any driver feels that the racing line is too dry and they switch on to the dry tyres, the rain will keep falling and making the racing line once again very wet. So it's a very tricky situation these drivers are in currently, with the rain not falling that heavily, but it's still needing the intermediate tyres.
Preznator is only 1.4 seconds behind Paris, so he's definitely mounting the pressure on, at least from what we can see. Whether Paris is feeling it, probably not, because he has been dominating this Grand Prix, and it doesn't seem like that's going to stop anytime soon. Because even if Preznator can get close, it's one thing catching up to a driver, it's another thing overtaking, especially around circuits where it's quite tricky to overtake. And unfortunately, Alpark is one of them. Yeah, 1.3 seconds of gap now as Camille and Kevin have severely detached from the battle for the lead of the Grand Prix. It's pretty much going to be between these two. Given no major circumstances like any pit stops take place, I don't honestly know if the Inters can go the distance. The drivers might have to come into the pits, but if one driver has to come in, everyone will have to. I don't think they'll be able to go 12 more laps, given that some drivers are on 12 lap old intermediates already. 24 laps seems like a bit of a stretch for some of those drivers like Tom 97 and Camille. Obviously they were the first to bite the bullet and try to lock on the intermediate tyres, and they might get a bit cautious towards the end of the Grand Prix. But
talking about pit stops, Kimi's Failer, Tom, Calvin, Andy, and Michael coming into the pits. Some of them switching on to the dry tyres. This is interesting. Kimi's going on to dry tyres, Andinator going on to dry tyres, Calvin going on to dry tyres, and Failer going on to dry tyres. Tom going on to a set of new intermediates. And the DRS has been enabled. This is interesting. This is very interesting. Tanita going on to the dry tyres as well, and Brownie going on to dry tyres as well. So
the thing is, it's still raining.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's still raining, and you can still kind of see on Tom's intermediates that he's struggling quite a bit on. You can still see a small bit of spray, but seeing as the DRS has been enabled, you would think that it's dry enough, but it is still raining. This is very interesting. As there goes Calvin on Tom 97. Tom clearly not feeling these intermediates that he's gone on to. So maybe it is time for the dry tyres. Paris in as well. What is he going on to? A set of soft tyres. Pressinator softs. Camille softs. Kevin softs. So the driver's going on to dry tyres now, even though it's still raining quite a bit.
Unfortunately, in the battle for the lead of the Grand Prix, Prisoner had picked up a penalty on the previous lap. So I said everyone was ordered to the top four all on a tightrope, and unfortunately flaps fell off it. However, stranger things have happened. If he can get past Paris and then get 3 seconds ahead, or obviously Paris could get a time penalty himself. But obviously now that the drivers can show their true pace or race pace or whatnot, obviously only the soft compound tyres, they can fully push now. And you know, obviously the race pace, the race practice that they've been doing can now come to fruition, as that's Jan Failer, the next one. Big up penalty. He obviously only has Calvin and Andinator behind him. Obviously after Tom made that mishap, pitting onto the intermediate tyres. So the softs that he's now on. There's a yellow flag somewhere. Michael Tinitzer has spun.
Oh yeah. Any front wing loss there? No, looks like his front wing is still intact. I don't know about his tyres though. They might be flat spotted quite hard, depending on how he came round. But he is able to carry on without any issues currently.
There's a terrific scrap for P5 with Jan Failer. I don't know what's happened to Kimi's, but Kimi's obviously was in P5 beforehand, but he must have had some sort of issue with getting held up in the pits, and being on the medium tyres adds to those woes. But you know, the battles that were not really happening in the wet are definitely happening in the dry. And Jan Failer now under all sorts of pressure from Calvin behind in the racing points. Jan Failer defends the inside line. Andinator's got a great ringside stake to try and see how this battle unfolds. And Failer defends the inside line through turn 4 with those medium tyres. Will definitely be in better shape towards the end of the Grand Prix, but we're not at the end of the Grand Prix just yet. Andinator loses some front wing, misjudging his braking behind the racing point of Calvin, and he will struggle now with a dislodged end plate. And to be lucky to finish in P7 at the moment, because downforce is definitely a thing you definitely need at Albert Park, and especially you'll definitely feel it through this sequence of corners, turn 11 and turn 12 here, and yeah, you can see he's already falling off the battle between Jan Failer and Calvin. It will be now for P5 in this race, although penalties might not be on Jan Failer's side as he picked up one only a few laps ago. Unfortunately, out in front, well, unfortunately for Presley in this case, Paris is absolutely flying. Presley just can't keep up with his pace. If anything, he's going to have to look behind him in his rearview mirrors for the rest of the Grand Prix, because Camille is catching up to him, and Kevin isn't that far behind either. So we could potentially see a very interesting scrap for P2 in this Grand Prix. But personally, the main focus now is just to try and extend that gap with this penalty, because at the moment he's very well, he's not going to finish on the podium at this rate. I mean, Kevin is there or thereabout, 3 seconds behind Presnader. So Presnader needs to get to move on and push to try and state his case on the podium and potentially even get close to Paris. But Paris is completely out in front, and yeah, not a lot stopping him now from winning the first race of the season. But obviously, time will tell. We only have to have a few more laps to find out the end result. And it looks like Paris is definitely on course to win the first race of the season as he stops his 23rd lap. And it goes even quicker on the fastest lap. Florian Elgato Gaming, that is, gets a 3-second time penalty down in P13. As yeah, that battle with P5 we're still mentioning is Tom 97 now gets another 3-second time penalty. He is now back in the points despite due to Michael Tinnett having a spin, and the Red Bulls are actually getting involved in a bit of a tussle. As there goes Brownie now past his teammate up into P11, and potentially he could snatch that point away from Tom 97 due to the British drivers a couple bundles of penalties.
Oh yeah, and up for 5th place, Calvin and Failer's going side by side, coming in through sector 1, coming through turn 5 now, I believe that was. They're going side by side now, coming into sector 2 there, still side by side. Paris gets a 3-second time penalty, but Calvin and Failer side by side. Failer down the inside as they're into sector 2 now, coming down to turn 10. Failer have to back out. Calvin gets 5th place. Oh, safety car. Ulas out of the Grand Prix, crashed in the first couple of corners, I believe, as he's out. I don't quite know where the car is, but safety car deployed.
And you know what that means? Paris, who just picked up a time penalty, at this point, won't win the race. Because, you know, as it stands, it's Camille who's on course to win this Grand Prix because of Jan Failer's teammate spending the pit lane there. I'm not really sure why he decided to come into the pits. Actually, to be fair, I do. He goes into the soft compound tyres and only loses 1 place. Maybe 2. It will be 2 as Warren gets past him as well. Unsurprisingly though, Andernator pits due to his wing damage, and he'll come out just behind Tom 97. But yeah, the final few laps of this Grand Prix, we've been hoping for the end of the Grand Prix to potentially salvage this race, and our wish has maybe been commanded. But yeah, Paris and President are both with time penalties. It's down to Camille and Kevin to potentially take the race win, as obviously the gaps that they had, Paris was safe with his penalty. He's not safe now, and he'll be hoping that we can get going as soon as possible. We're not going to be going green on this lap, so the earliest lap that we go green again will be lap 26, leaving 4 laps for Paris to try and clear 3 seconds out of everyone and take the win that's pretty much he's deserved and has had throughout this Grand Prix. But due to this 3-second time penalty, it's definitely in the balance, and anything can happen in the final few laps of this Grand Prix.
That's something I'm looking forward to. Paris, he needs to build up a gap to Camille and Kevin, because both himself and Presnader has time penalties, but Camille and Kevin are right behind them and right there to be able to not only take them on track but also on penalties come the checkered flag. I'm certainly looking forward to that, but Paris still there, going to be starting in the first place and having to build up at least a 3-second gap down, You of course won't be having to worry about Pressionator and those penalties, since he is also having a 3-second time penalty himself.
So at the moment, the 1, 2, 3 is Camille, Kevin, and Calvin. So it'll be a double Racing Point podium, similar to the one that we saw today, McLaren and the Racing Points, both occupying it. But we've still got a few more laps to go, and we'd assume that the safety car will indeed come in at the end of this lap. We've only got the 2 Red Bulls and Florian, who are yet to catch up to the back of the pack, but they are definitely pushing, and I think they'll be able to get to the back of the pack just in time, obviously assuming that the safety car will come in at the end of this lap. But we haven't been given the go-ahead from race control, and I don't think, well, I actually don't really know when the notification really pops up.
No,
if it's coming in, it's going to come in now.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Very late.
Yeah, quite late. I thought that at this point they would already have said it, but yep. Anyways, it is going to be green flags once these drivers come up to the start-finish line as, oh my, Michael Tanitsa, a 5-second penalty for a collision further back, but now as they cross the start-finish line, it's going to be green flags, green flags. They're allowed to overtake once they cross the start-finish line and into the first couple of corners. Paris still leading, Pressionator second, Camille, then Kevin, then Calvin, then Kimmy's. Everything is looking like they're going to stay in formation. No, Andonator attacking Tom, coming into turn 3 there. Round the outside goes Andonator. Is he able to keep the position? It turns to the inside. They're still going side by side, but Andonator is able to squeeze Tom 97 out and take 9th place. Tom down to 7th. He's going to be under pressure from Brownie now. Let's see if he'll be able to go for the move. He's in the slipstream. Is there room for him to go down the inside? Let's see. He sticks behind for now. Further ahead, any battling? Kevin looking close to go for the attack on Camille once they come up to the next couple of corners. But Kevin, oh my, oh my, oh my, cuts the chicane just a slight bit, and that's a 3-second time penalty. That is not good for his chances. Oh, and he almost loses it there, coming into Sector 3, the final couple of corners there. So that means that Camille is the only driver in the top 4 without any penalties.
So we start the third to last lap. He's only 1.4 seconds behind Paris, and he's definitely, well, he's trying to get past Pressionator, but obviously there'll only be DRS of 2 laps. So I think Camille knows now that the race win is in sight. Not on track, but due to the penalties. So I think his task at hand is just trying to stay behind Pressionator and hope that the gap at the end is less than 3 seconds of Paris, because he is pushing like an absolute madman to the grocery stores. And it looks like, well, he's cleared the gap to a second from Pressionator, and as the sun is really starting to come out now in the final few laps. The DRS won't really be a factor for the final few laps, you'd imagine, but who knows, the drivers are definitely packed. We've still got the top 5 closely intact, then Kimmy's further back on the only driver on the medium tyres, holding up a gaggle of cars, of which Andrea is already making more moves, and Jan Failer actually having to get out of it to let the Mercedes driver through. Else that could have been a bit of a squeaky bum time for both of them, and that could have ended up essentially with both of the drivers facing the wrong way if Jan Failer gets all out of shape on the exit of the penultimate corner there. But yeah, we stopped at the penultimate lap, and now it's 1.6 seconds between Paris and Camille. It looks good for the McLaren driver in the moment, but he's once again, he's got 2 warnings. He is still living on a tightrope. One more warning, and the top 4 is going to stay the same. I mean, Calvin actually could potentially stick a podium here. I'm going to check his penalties.
I think he's a 3-second time penalty.
Yeah, he does have a 3-second time penalty. So Camille is the only driver.
That's the second one for him. Calvin now up to 6 seconds worth of time penalties. But further behind, we're seeing battling. Andinator going down the inside of Warren, coming into sector 2 up to turn 9 and 10 there. He goes up into 7th place. He's absolutely flying currently. And he's going to close up to Kimmy's in no time, as he's going to get the DRS for the 3rd DRS zone here on the track. Of course, one of the tracks on the calendar with 3 DRS zones, as Andinator opens the DRS and Kimmy's is a sitting duck on his 9 laps old medium tyres without any DRS. But Andinator pit under the safety car onto softs, and he's just flying up into 6th place, coming down from 9th, I believe, or 10th just a couple of laps ago, as all the drivers are now coming on to the final lap of the Grand Prix. As looking,
Camille, wow, that he nearly lost it through turn 1 there. Obviously, that's one of the particular zones you'd imagine where penalties can be picked up. But as tentative as he wants to be, he needs to not lose a second, as that was Calvin getting all out of shape. And his soft tyres are pretty much cooked. He obviously pitted the lap earlier than everyone else. Everyone else pretty much on 9 lap whole tyres apart from him. But the final lap of the Grand Prix, and it's all down to whether Camille can not lose a second / not pick up one more warning, and it's a Grand Prix victory for the Polish driver. Let's see as he comes to turn 11, turn 12. So difficult, so easy to get a time penalty, and he's avoided it. But saying that, he went very tentative and nearly lost it, trying to go quite slowly. But for the McLaren driver, starting the season off, it looks like it's going to be victory for him. For Paris, though, he's completely dominated this straight because of his time penalty that accumulated only a few laps ago. He's not going to win the race, which is very unfortunate for him because he fully deserves it. But as he crossed the line, 1, 2, 3, Camille wins. There we go. He managed to do it, did the McLaren driver. Kept out of trouble, and the McLaren driver takes victory for the first race of the season as they all file across the line. And that's another race, gents, where penalties have decided the victor of the Grand Prix. And for another race at Melbourne.
Yeah, certainly. I don't think I've seen a race at Melbourne where the race haven't been decided on some sort of penalty. Of course, Albert Park is notoriously easy to get a penalty, especially through the turn 11 and 12 chicanes. You just try and optimize the line there. But Camille there dancing on the podium, getting the win. If not on track, it was decided on penalties, and that is of course also a win that gives you 25 points. But Paris doing well, taking 2nd place, was first on track, but unfortunately wasn't able to stay clean in terms of the penalties. But Warren,
you see that, gents?
What?
Alessio, fastest lap with a 36.3.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new fastest lap, new lap record, and I believe that would maybe possibly also be the quickest lap, both in terms of time and average speed in F1. But I'm not quite sure on all the stats there.
It's a shame that he didn't finish inside the top 10, else he would have got fastest lap for point fastest lap. But,
well, if he had stayed in the race, that would have clearly been a victory. 36 seconds lap. But yeah, well done to Camille for staying clean and not getting any penalties. Paris winning on track, but unfortunately going down to 2nd place. Pressionator taking 2nd on track, but going 3rd on penalties. Then Kevin in 4th. Kimmy's in 5th, Warren takes 6th and driver of the day, at least that's what the game wants to say. Then we have a Brownie in 7th, then Calvin in 8th, Andinator takes 9th, and Tom takes the final points. Outside the points, we have Jan Fehler, we have FK Gaming, and Michael Tsanitsa, and of course Alessio, even though he didn't really finish the race. And the only 2 drivers we lost today, unfortunately, were Ulasosi in 15th and Scrippy in 16th. None of those being classified as they didn't complete the race. But what a start to the season, seeing every single almost every single tyre compound used today. We saw the full wets both in qualifying and the race, and the intermediates for the same, and then we saw the softs and the mediums being used once the track dried out, and of course also a small safety car towards the end of the Grand Prix, spicing things up for the last couple of laps. So I think that is all we're going to have time for here tonight, unfortunately, but we will be back next week, same time, same place, for the Bahrain Grand Prix, kicking off the second race of this season 20 here in AOR. But it's been a pleasure commentating with you tonight, James, and we'll be back next week. So until then, have a good one, and goodbye.